With the media coverage of Black Lives Matter protests against police brutality and the rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans and other groups, one of my students asked me the question, are Americans racist? I always try my best to answer my students' questions, whether they're about the English language or American culture, or about anything really. This is a really difficult question, but I'm going to try my best to answer it for all of you. Now, maybe you will agree with me, or maybe you'll disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. Let's have a discussion, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. So, are Americans racist? Well, I'm only one American, and I can't possibly answer for all Americans. But I think a better question to ask is the United States of America a racist country? Personally, I don't think the US is a racist country in and of itself. However, I believe there are systems and institutions in this country that were built upon racist ideology. And some people benefit from and others are harmed by their very existence. So what do I mean by systems and institutions? A system is something that a society needs to maintain order or to provide services to its citizens. Some examples of systems include the educational system, the healthcare system, and the criminal justice system, which refers to courts and the police. Systemic racism is the idea that some of these systems do not treat people equally based on their race. More clearly, some groups have advantages within these systems that others do not. Let me give you an example of how systemic racism affects the educational system in the United States. In the United States, schools are funded or given money by property taxes. Property taxes refer to the additional money that you must pay to the government for owning your own home. Now, some of this money goes towards local public schools within the community. As a result, if you live in a wealthy or a rich area, you can expect that you will have less students in your classes. You can also afford to pay teachers better, which can then help to attract more experienced teachers and teachers with better credentials. Also, with more money comes more tutoring, college and university guidance, and a variety of extracurricular activities. Extracurricular activities refer to the activities that a school organizes outside of the regular curriculum. This may include sports, arts, or even music clubs. On the other hand, schools in low-income or poorer neighborhoods will have lower paid teachers, overcrowded classrooms, and little to no tutoring or extracurricular activities for students. Now, this may seem like it's just a difference in socioeconomic levels. Or in other words, this may be a difference based on how rich or how poor different parts of society are. But actually, the housing system is a system that has also been affected by racism. Decades after the Civil War, government agencies began to divide U.S. cities according to different neighborhoods that they found either desirable, attractive, or undesirable, unattractive, for possible investment. This process was called redlining. At the time, the desirable or attractive neighborhoods were reserved for white Americans, while Black Americans were forced to live in undesirable or unattractive areas through legal segregation. Segregation means separation based off of some characteristic. In this case, Black families were being separated from white families because of the color of their skin. Even if a Black family wanted to buy a house in a desirable area, they were blocked by banks and insurance companies. Real estate agents, banks, lending organizations, and insurance companies would use these redlined maps to deny Black families from loans and other services to help secure homes. Their reasoning was that because the Black Americans were living in an undesirable neighborhood that was bad for investment, they couldn't possibly be able to afford a home in a more attractive, more desirable, and higher priced neighborhood. But really, this was due to the color of their skin and had nothing to do with their ability to afford homes in different areas. Even as recent as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta housing market showed that banks preferred to offer loans to lower income or poorer white families than middle or upper income Black families. So why is it so important to own a home in a good area? Well, historically speaking, owning a home and earning a college degree are the best ways to generate wealth. In other words, if you want to earn enough money to give to your children and to your grandchildren, something that we refer to as intergenerational wealth, the best way to do this is to own property and to have a good education. In the past, Black Americans were prevented from or not allowed to own homes, and universities could legally refuse to accept Black Americans from attending their universities due to segregation. Even though Black Americans can get homes in any area that they choose, and universities can no longer deny entry due to race, Black Americans still suffer greatly in their ability to build intergenerational wealth for their children and grandchildren. In fact, for every $100 of wealth that a white family holds, a Black family holds $5.06. And as you can see, the effects of redlining in the past affect the wealth that a Black family has today. That is why poorer neighborhoods have more Black families than white families living in them. And from earlier, we know that the local schools receive less funding and the educational quality is more affected. So as you can see, systemic racism is a huge problem which can affect multiple systems within a society. Now, these institutions and systems were established decades and even centuries ago. And the thoughts of the people who created them were very different at that time. People today who benefit from these institutions may not even realize that they are receiving some benefit. And receiving the benefits from systemic racism doesn't always mean that these people are bad people or racist people, but they may have some implicit bias. Before we discuss implicit bias, it's important to know what a stereotype is. A stereotype is an overgeneralization or a widely held but simplified image that someone might have about someone else. For example, many people in the US think that people from Saudi Arabia have a lot of oil and drive Ferraris. Now, while this might be true for some people from Saudi Arabia, this is definitely not true for all Saudis. And so it's a stereotype. All stereotypes are bad. Let me repeat that. All stereotypes are bad. Now, you might think that the example that I just gave you is positive. Being rich and having a Ferrari is a good thing, right? But remember, people are unique, and you do not want to judge or think about someone in a very general way like this. If you do, you may not be really understanding that person. And when you accept a stereotype as true, whether it sounds like a positive or a negative characteristic, well, then you begin to have implicit bias. Implicit bias is when you start to have attitudes towards people or groups without your conscious knowledge. You're unaware that you have these feelings. One of my former students at the beginning of my career once said that she wanted to speak English like me. She asked me how I learned English, and she wanted to know how I got rid of my accent. Well, my well-meaning student wasn't being racist, but she had implicit bias. She couldn't imagine that someone that looked like me could be born in the United States and a native speaker of English. In her minds, Americans, and especially English teachers, looked a certain way. And I must be a foreigner, and I had to have studied English like her. Now, implicit biases can have huge, long-standing effects. For example, some language students may not hire me as a private teacher or trust my advice as a language teacher because I do not look American. This isn't just true of the English teaching job market either. Resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks for interviews as identical resumes with black-sounding names. That's one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice that of the white unemployment rate. So if systemic racism exists in all these different institutions like education, healthcare, banks, and criminal justice, and Americans have implicit biases, is the United States a racist country? I still say no. I think a racist is someone who knows of their biases and privileges and does nothing. Sure, some of these types of people exist in the United States, but I think the majority of Americans truly want a united country with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. And I think the first thing that we can all do is to become aware of our implicit biases. In my opinion, the US being a racist country is a complete misconception. And there are other misconceptions about learning English. So click or tap the screen if you want to learn more.